Now, I would like to introduce my friend. Her name is Barbara Davies. She is the director of the Westchester Historical Society and is a wonderful speaker and has done many programs from the library. So please welcome Barbara Davis.
Thank you, Joan. I'm actually co-director. The other co-director at the Historical Society is Suzanne Panditch. Some of you might have met her when she was the director of Lyndhurst. And we are the co-director, and we have our colleague, Patrick Raftery, is our absolutely excellent librarian archivist. I'll tell you a little bit more about the Westchester County Historical Society as we go through the program. Before we start, I have to say that lineup of programs is awesome. I was the community relations coordinator at the New Rochelle Public Library for 16 years before taking the position with the Westchester County Historical Society. And I know what it's like to put on a slate of programs like that. So hats off, Joan. It's really amazing. And that doesn't even take into account the children's programming. So you're all very lucky, you Chappaqua residents. I hope we have other residents on board tonight too, because I do give sort of a general walkthrough on how to research your Westchester house, but I'm focusing on Chappaqua, of course, tonight. Before we get started, I want to say that this is always a work in progress. It's really, really a process. And it's a fun process, but it takes time and it takes some patience. I'm going to walk you through just the same research I did myself on a Chappaqua house. To get started, I'm going to do my screen share. And here we go, researching your Chappaqua house. Here's an older map of Westchester on the left, a little out of focus, I must say, and more modern one. Now, each community in Westchester has its own personality, and I'm learning that more and more as I work with different communities from top to bottom. I actually grew up in northern Westchester, did a lot of work on the Hudson, and have been in New Rochelle and the city historian for many years. So I sort of crisscrossed, but now I'm finding all these other communities. And what I also have learned is that each community has its own way of taking care of its history. Even though it's mandated to have a municipal historian, not all communities do. Some communities have excellent historical societies. Some are sort of floundering. It's a total mix. And some communities, many have historic sites. And they tend to get all sort of confused, but there are three distinct entities. The Westchester County Historical Society is the organization that collects for all of the county, fills in the gaps where the gaps are needed, takes in collections where the municipality, the community can't care for them. And we have a massive, massive collection of manuscripts, books, et cetera, et cetera. You'll learn more. So you all are extremely lucky because you have a top-notch municipal historian, Gray Williams, and you have an excellent historical society in a historic site, the Horace Greeley House. So you're off to a good start already. And you'll see a little bit more about each of those entities as we go through. The other thing about Westchester is that it has an amazing array of architectural styles, houses of different ages representing different eras. We are so fortunate because we're a very old county, having started in the 17th century. And we've had such growth and development being right outside New York City that we've also attracted amazing architects and fine craftsmen with all the immigrant movements into the country. So many settled in Westchester, and we benefited from their skill and the talent they brought from their homeland. going back, beginning with the colonial period, and I picked a few Chappaqua examples of early colonial houses, and you have many, many. You have also shingle and Queen Anne Victorian styles, as well as a slew of revival styles. Westchester was the place for revival, colonial revival, Spanish revival, Tudor revival, Italian Renaissance revival. It goes on, and the revival styles are very well represented because this was very popular beginning in the early 1900s, but then flourished in the 20s when there was tremendous growth and development. And particularly the southern Westchester communities just resound with revival style houses. And then post-World War II, there was another huge growth, mushrooming population, and the lands that hadn't been transformed into residential parks and neighborhoods had still remained farms. They were ready for quick, rapid development to accommodate the many men returning from war and wanting to move to the suburbs for quieter life, good schools, places within commuting distance to Manhattan, and boom, 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 the post-World War II houses went up. So we have an amazing array of mid-century houses, as well as contemporary, because of course, with its beauty, its natural topography, and the open woodlands in the northern areas in particular, were conducive to the modernist movement from the 50s, 60s onward. These are two representatives two represented contemporaries in Chappaqua. When you begin your search, I suggest a bird's eye view. I always suggest a bird's eye view. That's the best view, I always think. You want to get a look at your county, your community, then hone in your neighborhood, your home. And a good start is the book that's published by the Westchester County Historical Society. There are others, but Westchester County History by Field Horn is more recent, and it covers a very, very general outline of the county's development, and it gives you a good starting point. There are also books about individual communities and the Westchester Library System. If you don't have it in your own library, they can get many of these for you. That's the best way, through interlibrary mail. You at your own library will have books about Chappaqua, but if you're interested in other communities, that's a good route to go. Also, there were a number of books done by Arcadia Press, and most of our communities were covered by Arcadia Press. These are the sepia covered books you see. They're more pictorial histories, and all the municipal historians jumped on the bandwagon with these because it was fast. It was an easy way to get our history out, our images out, to let people know about their community without a great expenditure of money, and the royalties usually going to our historical society or our local library. Here's the one for Newcastle, Chappaqua and Millwood, done by Chappaqua History Committee and Gray Williams, who I'm sure oversaw the whole thing, with the foreword by President Bill Clinton. The book on the right, which doesn't have the title on the cover, is sort of a general, very general history. It's the bicentennial book for Chappaqua. And there are others that we'll talk about, but these are good starting points. And this is the Bible for architecture on Westchester County. It was done by Frank Sanchez back in the 70s, I believe, but still stands up and covers the history from the very earliest times to late 21st century. Here are 3 good books that will help you determine the style of your house. My favorite is The Field Guide to American Houses by Virginia and Lee McAllister. There are others that helps you get an idea, if you don't know already, what to call your house, what the style is, and what's important. particularly what's important to preserve. So to begin, start sleuthing. Let's get organized. Grab your phone because it has a camera on it, and a notebook with a pencil. It doesn't have to be a Marimekko pencil like mine pictured here, but you do want a pencil because historical societies and archives want you to use a pencil. It's so easy when you're working with a pen to have it slip and off it goes onto a document, and become there, the mark become there forever. I also suggest a chart such as this, and I do have a number of resources that I'm going to email to Joan that she can make available to you afterwards. And that includes this chart with the date, with the person who sold the property, with the person who bought it. You can put in these other details. I always think of the library and page number, and you can also include other things, but it's a way to keep track of everything, and it really is important. I don't think there's an app for this yet, but maybe that's something we should look into. And then I want you to identify resources. These are the places that you're going to visit to do your house search. The government offices include possibly the county clerk's office, but not necessarily. And the same with the county archives, which is at the county record center in Elmsford, and your city, village, or town hall. The Westchester County Historical Society is also located in the Westchester County Record Center, your local public library, and your municipal historical society and or local historian. So let's start with the county clerk's office. This is in White Plains. It's attached to the county office building. Most people access it from Martin Luther King Boulevard, but you can also access it. And here is where, here is where all the deeds, titles, and other information is available online, and there is some assistance with researching those things. The other route you can go is to visit the county archives and Westchester County Historical Society. As I said before, we're in the record center. It's one-stop shopping. So the archives are the public records, the government records for the county that continue to be preserved and maintained in this building, temperature controlled, state of the art. And when it was built under County Executive Andy Spano, they had the brilliant idea of also including room for the Westchester County Historical Society. So our offices are there, and we also have state-of-the-art temperature-controlled vaults maintained, taken care of by our excellent librarian, archivist, Pat Raftery. Now, local library, that's also a good place because librarians generally know everything about their community. And some libraries actually have local history rooms, such as the Yonkers Library, which is maintained by their historical society in Bronxville. Down in their lower level, the Bronxville Historical Society has their archives down below. In New Rochelle Library, where the E.L. Doctorow Local History Room is on the second floor, they have a separate archive for historical records, and then they have a works area with a lot of materials also related to local history. The other stop is Historical Society and or museum. Many of these are housed in historic buildings. You see Bedford, Hastings, Grove Street in Terrytown houses the Terrytown Historical Society, and Ossining. Sometimes it's combined. Occasionally, historical societies are on their own, but I can't think of any right off the bat. On our website, which is westchesterhistory.com, and again, you don't have to take notes on this. You can get the resource sheet either from Joan or I'll put my address up also. You can email me for it if you're interested. We have an area for community resources where you can find the address and contact information for historical societies and for local historians and for historic sites. So back to the Record Center, and this is where we're going to start our process. As I explained, the property records are here under the county archives. The Westchester County Historical Society will be celebrating its 150th anniversary next year. We're the 11th oldest county historical society in the country, the third oldest in New York. And over those 150 years, we have collected and collected and collected. So we have an extensive array of manuscripts, books, maps, covering all areas of the county and all different facets for each community. What you can do in this room when you make an appointment on a Wednesday, this is our reading room, you would be able to do for your house research, deed, chain of owners. You can look at maps and atlases. You can look at subdivisions. You can look at books, vertical files. You can also access our computer to look at our online collection. And we can also help you with oddities. If you get stuck along the way with your house history, this is a good go-to place to help you figure that out, because we have a lot of legal documents and can sort of, even though we're not lawyers, we can sort of know where to find the right route to find the answer. So at the Record Center, we have access to the deeds that are in the county clerk office. You can also access this from home, but there is a fee involved. I think it's $20 or $25 for 24 hours. I always say, gang up a lot of people, share the cost, get all your information you want together, and then go for it. Or you can make the trip on a Wednesday and use our computers for free to do your search. And I'm going to walk you through one of these shortly. As I said, we also have maps, lots of maps. The county archives has maps. They also have many online, and I'm going to show you some of those. We have them on microfilm and hard copy. We also have on microfilm the Sanborn maps. The Sanborn Company was located in Mount Vernon, and these were fire insurance maps. They were color-coded for fire insurance companies, for insurance companies to cover for fires. The pink, which was actually red to begin with, were the brick buildings. The yellow were wood frame. They had a whole color code to indicate what material the building was made from. And we have them on microfilm. If you remember these microfilm readers, many of the Sanborn maps are also available online, and I'll show you that in a second. Here is our website when you go to collections, and our online collections database is very easy to get to. And this is where you can find whatever has been scanned, processed, and put up. It's a constant chore. We're constantly processing. We have wonderful volunteers helping us to scan, catalog, index, and get up online our collection. We now have over 90,000 images. It's going to keep going and keep going. And that's what makes history so exciting right now, is that we're constantly finding out new things as things are digitized. Manuscripts, documents that have been hiding away for years and years are coming out into the public, and we're learning a lot from this new technology. But look, we have a card catalog, and we love it. Of course, you don't see these in libraries anymore. I had to explain to a young intern what a card catalog was. But when you go to our card catalog, and if you're seeking something on Chappaqua and you open the drawer, there are cards with Chappaqua. If you're looking for a particular person who lived in your house, that could be on the card catalog. It's all by subject. It will tell you what's in our collection. Our actual collection might not be online, but it's in the building. And this is just a shot of our vaults in the back. And this is what you're looking at is one of maybe 30 of these big long shelves that move, and we have these books and boxes of manuscripts, and this is where the collection is kept. So when you find something in the card catalog, and before you come into the reading room and let the staff know what you're looking for, they will have already pulled the resources that might be of help to you. Two things I immediately went for in the Chappaqua section were these two actually pamphlets. They were in the pamphlet section, and they became extremely helpful in my house history for Chappaqua. And what house did I choose? Well, I needed one that was on the market, because otherwise I'd have to get the owner's permission to do this hunt. I thought it was only fair. So I chose one, and I wanted an older house. So I went through many different realtor sites online, and I came up with this one at 275 Quaker Street. And on some of the sites, it said the Dickinson Conklin house. So, oh, bingo. Must be an older house. And it certainly looks colonial. Doesn't look colonial revival. It looks colonial. And sure enough, on one of the sites, it tells me the year it was built. But right now, I have to tell you something. It's not the correct date. It's not far off, but it's not the correct date. And I find that very often on the realtor sites, the information, you have to take it with a grain of salt. It can help you get to the right place, but it's not necessarily accurate. They also often have architectural styles, often incorrect. If it's an older house, they usually have as architectural style old. This one actually is correct. It's colonial. Mini estate, that would not be a term that we would use, but that's a realtor term. The first thing I wanted to do was a chain of ownership for this property. Also from the website, I found out the realtor's website, it's very easy to find the property owner. In some communities, you can take the address, plug it in, and go to a property portal, and you'll get a whole lot of information. Chappaqua doesn't have that property portal, but there are many realtor sites that give the current owner, and so that's what I used. And then I went to the county clerk's Westchester records online, and after signing in with the user ID and password, I went to land records. And I put in the last name of the person. And here I put in, it was actually under Newcastle, I believe. And all throughout the search, I'd have to try both Chappaqua and Newcastle. And then I would put any document and then search. And what I came up with when I had put in Bazel, I think it's Basil or Basil, that I came up with this deed. It was the deed from the Evan Norris and Annette Chan Norris to Susan and Julian Basil in 2014. And this was many pages long and gave a great deal of information, all typed out, including the boundaries. So each time there's a deed, the boundaries are in that deed, but the deed information that you get online has changed. So then the next search, I took the same name, the Norris and Chan Norris, and plugged that in and came up with the next deed. The deed was Robert D. Brooks and Mary Lee had sold to Evan Norris and Annette Chan Norris in 1977. So then my next move would be to see the Brooks. Who did they buy from? Well, when I put Brooks in, it didn't come up because they had bought it before 1966. I know this sounds a little complicated, but they do give you directions on the site. And you could always go and read through the directions. So if the transaction happened before 1966, which apparently did, instead I had to go to the index books pictured here. So instead of going search by name, I searched by index books, and I put the last name in, and I picked the nearest range. I figured they must have lived there about 10 or 20 years. So I put in 1958 to 1966, and it was Newcastle. And then comes up this, a index book listing, and it's all handwritten. It's for Newcastle, and I scroll down to find Brooks, and there's one Brooks. No, that's not right, because it's Robert. So I keep scrolling down, and I find the Brooks I'm looking for, Robert D. and Mary Lee. And so they're the grantee. And who did they buy from? They bought from a Vera B. Winter. And at the bottom, it gives me the library number and the page number. And I can go right to it at that point and come up with the deed. From then on, I now am getting the names, but I'm going to have to use that same process of going to the index book, trying to figure out what the time. It takes a little bit of time. You might need more than $20 if you're doing it online, but it's worth it. And then there are sometimes these glitches where there's no deed because the transfer was through a trust, or there was a sheriff's sale. So there's some hiccups always. It's not always clear sailing. But if you have a house that's not real old and there aren't many deeds, you're going to be able to find it fairly easily. And here in this deed, you can see how the property boundaries are all listed out. And there are more pages to these. I'm just showing you the first page of each. And it will also show you the sale price. So the next, I had to again go to the index book to find White. And I found Vera White. Actually, it wasn't Vera. It was, I first found Ezra and Vera White and came up with their deed. And then I continued to go down, each time listing the name of the owner and the name of the seller, coming to Edwin Conklin. Oh, we're getting close because it's the Dickinson Conklin house. There were many deeds amongst the Conklins that we went through. And the handwriting gets a little tricky unless you're very good at reading script. And I'll tell you that the interns we hire today can't read it because they can't write it. So it's sometimes a struggle. It's not in clear typewritten. But I was extremely fortunate. And when I chose this house, I had no idea how fortunate I was. It has such rich history, but so many Chappaqua houses do. And it's featured in this book, The Early Quaker Hamlet of Old Chappaqua. In Chappaqua, over the years, you've had a number of individuals very interested in history, including your current historian. Passionate genealogists. So you have a lot of records. In comparison to other communities I've done house histories in, you are exceptional. And this was one of the things that told me that, because here in this book, not only did they tell me about the house, it gave a deed chain for me already laid out after I had done mine and came up with a little bit of a dead end. And here it starts with the very first, May 28, 1790, in the will of Robert Dickinson, and the library and page number right there. Then it goes to a mortgage. Then it goes to the Conklin family, and from one Conklin to the other, which I have, and even annotations to explain who these people were. And the language is just wonderful. James and Tristram Conklin leased to their father because of natural love and affection all this property plus another 15-acre parcel, the lease to last during the natural life of Timothy Conklin. Then they give, it all involved the mills and mill ponds. They were on property that was really instrumental in early Chappaqua. There were a number of mills doing sawmill, grist mill, and fulling mill. Fulling being the mill that softened the flax to make wool or linen. And then we go, there's also a referee to Rachel Conklin, Conklin to Armstrong, and then Conklin to others, and then to Ezra Winter. We come to the Winters, and this is in 1918. And then it jumps, there's no Conklin, Ezra Winter, and then 1945 from Vera Winter to Chapin Hoskins, and then from Chapin Hoskins to Robert D. Brooks, the same Brooks we saw earlier. So there's a lot of information, and it's right in my lap. Hallelujah. It's not always so easy, but easier in Chappaqua. So now we go to the maps. And there are a number of even earlier maps, and I'm going to talk about those later, but this is where we usually start at the Westchester County Historical Society in the county archives. This is an 1867 Beers, and you'll see Newcastle and Chappaqua laid out here. It gets complicated with Newcastle and Chappaqua. You'll see that some of the maps, they're in with Sparta, which is Ossining. Such as this one. This is an 1881 map, and we have the town of Newcastle, and here's Chappaqua, which they're referring to the village right here, and then Sparta is for some reason on this map. A very interesting little area in Ossining. And zooming in, I was able to actually pinpoint the homes of the Conklins and I'm not seeing it on this one. This is another close-up. Here we have an 1893 of Newcastle, Chappaqua again down here. And these maps give the property owner on the map when you zoom in, not this big one, but the insert. I'll tell you, Gray knows all the maps and which ones give the property names. Here's a very interesting look at North Castle and part of Newcastle on a 1900 map. And in going, zooming in on this, I was also able to pinpoint the Conklin property. And here's the 1901 Bromley. This is an atlas, and so it covered all of the areas, the Bromley atlases. This is 1901, and as you see, this has Bedford, it has North Castle, it has Newcastle, and it does have property owners listed in it. These are online, this one in particular at the county archives. You could look it up tonight if you wanted, and you can zoom in to see the properties, who the owners are. Here's a 1908 map that I have. The Conklins are right here. Their property. Here's a 1911 Bromley, also from the county archives. And here you're beginning to see, this is a completely different area, but it does show you how they did the subdivisions. On these maps from 1911 on, you'll see these boxes. These are subdivisions. And then you'll see little boxes in those boxes. And those little boxes will often be in color, and they're the buildings that got built in those subdivided lots. If you morphed it, it would be fascinating. And here we have the 1930s Hopkins. Now this is big, and in these atlases, they would then do pages of different sections, which you can really see the detail. So up here, you see all the subdivisions, no houses yet. And then you see the open space and who owns it. And here, the downtown, it's been subdivided and lots of little boxes for the buildings inside. And on the other pages that you'll find with those subdivisions, with the different sections, you'll be able to see the owners listed. The Sanborn maps I already explained. You can access them through the New York Public Library. By the way, you can get a New York Public Library card and access all their digital records, even if you don't live in Manhattan, and there's no fee. And they have such a wealth that I strongly recommend it. Can be a little overwhelming, but it doesn't take much to get a NYPL card, and it opens up all kinds of doors. The Library of Congress also has Sanborn maps. For Chappaqua, they have a number from 1925 and 1930. And here's a picture of one of the Chappaqua maps where you see the entire town, and it's indexed so that you can find your location. And here's one section of it. As you see again, there's the there's an index, there's and another one, it gives the color coding, what it means. On this map, all of the buildings were wood frame. So while we're still at the County Record Center, even though you can do this online, while we're there, I wanted to bring up the fact that with our online collection, which you can find access to on our homepage, go right to collections. And we have over 90,000 images online now. You can spend a lot of time browsing our collection and having a field day, not only looking at Chappaqua. It is fascinating. There are postcards, there are etchings, a lot of photographs. Really, really great. You go to keyword, put in a very general keyword like Chappaqua, make sure you hit the box, images only, or you can see the whole entire collection and spend hours at the monitor. But there's a wealth of good stuff here, and we keep adding and adding and adding. What I found for the Dickinson Conklin house was this photograph. It's actually from the 1970s, but it was great to have an image of the house. There weren't any earlier images, though we have some early images of other Chappaqua houses. So my next stop was going to Chappaqua. I couldn't wait, field trip. And I went to your town hall. Here's the front of it with their beautiful mums out in front. I parked in the back and went in through the back door. And I was so tickled to see they like history. This probably came from the Historical Society, I would imagine, a bit of an exhibit. And Mr. Greeley himself, and a wonderful aerial map of early Chappaqua. Early view. I think it's a photographic view. And I made my way to the building department to see what kind of records they might have. Each town is different. Each city is different. I know I went online and I couldn't find a property portal. I could find tax assessor and the tax rolls, but some communities have ownership cards, ownership information. Others have actual permits. You can go to your town hall and go to the building department, and they will access them for you. They were so friendly. You just have to sign in, and they were more than happy to help. Not willing to have their picture taken, but and what I found was this came up on the screen with the current owner, and it gave the different permits that had been applied for by the previous owner. It also would tell who the architect was on those previous permits, but the information that's been scanned goes from 1936 to 2013. So if your house was built between 1936 and 2013, you will be able to find the architect of your house by going to probably, most likely, because they would have had to file a permit to build it, and their name would have had to been on that permit. So unless there was a snafu, you'll be able to find the architect. And that's huge because it's often hard to find who the architect was and who the builder was. You can also find out who did all the changes, all the alterations, and that is a big plus. But it doesn't really help previous to 1936. But that's okay. You have other routes to go. So now I walked across the street to the Chappaqua Library. And this is another thing I like about Chappaqua. You can do this whole house history on foot. Get your steps in. Because off I went to the Chappaqua Library. I told them I was coming and met with Amy Berger, who is fabulous. And she showed me their map collection. They have a lot of good maps. I brought them some duplicates we had, and we tried to figure out which they had and which they didn't have. She's going to talk to Gray Williams and they'll sort it all out. But they have a very good collection of maps in this book, big book, and it's all protected that you can peruse at your leisure. Any of the librarians can access it, but if Amy's there, she knows the collection very well. There is a small local history collection that's back in the what I would call the tech services or processing room. And they have a number of books about Chappaqua history, some pamphlets, newsletters. They have a great collection of yearbooks, a wide variety. And there is an index. They retrieve it and bring it out to you so that you can use it while you're in the library. Next, I went over, but I drove, to the Newcastle Historical Society, which had been the home of Horace Greeley. Beautifully done historical site, I must say, that houses the Historical Society. And I was so fortunate that Marion Gray was there doing a program earlier for second graders, and Gray, her husband, Marion and Gray Williams, Chappaqua treasures par excellence, were both there to help me. Now, the Historical Society has limited hours, and you're best to call and make an appointment. And the director, who's terrific, will make sure that Gray and or Marion will be there to help you because they know everything. And Marion has organized the collection. She's labeled it. Gray has been responsible for amassing it and keeping it, all the knowledge in his head. They are just encyclopedic when it comes to Chappaqua history, immediately knew the house I was talking about and immediately knew where I could find information. They also have an extensive map collection here in the map drawers, and Gray can navigate that very well. In the room, they also, oh, here's one early example of one of the maps they have, giving the names of the different early residents. They also have a terrific collection of books about Chappaqua and the surrounding area. Really good collection to be used in the room, which is quite pleasant. What I found fabulous, historical records of North Castle, Newcastle. These were the town minutes, the history, the census, the cemetery lists. Oh my gosh, all in these volumes. When I said that these genealogists did their work, this was just really wonderful to have these and have it saved and preserved. I immediately went to see about my early people, the Dickinsons and the Conklins, and here there's a whole bunch of Dickinsons. And it says see also Dickinson, and that happens. There could be different spelling. And we see that one had the mill. Yeah, there was the pond and the mill operating there. Arnold was with the roads. It's a real fun thing to see some of the other roles they took. They were with the census, security, excise masters, warrants. I know in my town, the fence fixer was a big deal, the care of the poor, Indian deeds. You can get a little sense of what their world was about. They also had the same books that we had at the Historical Society, which had a great deal of information about the people as well. This was in one of the books all about the Dickinson Conklin homestead. It was like pay dirt, got it right here. And it talks about the old house, the large mill. It said in its day before the advent of steam power, it supported 3 mills. This was part of Chappaqua Lake, or what was the sawmill, the grist mill, and the fulling mill, and how they got sold. It talks a little bit more. There was rumors that it was used as an inn. It was a very good location for people to sit and wait whether things were being milled. And there was some talk that some libation might have been offered, but that has not been documented. And then there was some talk about a white lilac inn, which sounds just so romantic and lovely, but again, not documented. There was another, the other book had a 2-page Dickinson Conklin house that talked about it being part of the mill and the location. And after 1918, it was owned for years by Ezra Winter, famous muralist. Well, we have another thing going on here. So we then went to the files. They have these terrific files of Newcastle families, people who lived here, mostly earlier times, but these files are packed with articles, with deeds if they have them, with information about their houses, lots of stuff that has been collected over the years, all carefully organized and arranged. Thank you, Marion Gray. And then they have drawers after roads and residences. So I found Quaker Road. And in this folder, there was all kinds of things about the different houses, including the Dickinson Conklin house. There was this wonderful article that was in one of the newsletters. It was a walk along Quaker Street and talked about what you would see and the different places that no longer exist, the grist mills, the duck pond, just various things. It would be great to make a copy and actually stroll the street today. And up here on the second page, the much altered house at 275 Quaker Street dates back to the 18th century and belonged successively to the Dickinson and the Shadane families. Nope, that was crossed out and Conklin put in. I had gone on a little bit of a wild goose chase because there's another Dickinson and Shadane family house, but no, this is the Conklin house. And it talks again about the mills. And then it continues with the walk going along the way and ends up down at the Dodge farm. As Gray said, if you can't find anything about them while they're living, you might be able to find something about them after they died. And of course, Gray being the expert on graveyards and cemeteries and having done an excellent tour last weekend, has made sure that your cemetery records are really prime. They're great. And of course, at the Historical Society, they're all easily accessible. So we've already covered that. Who were the people who lived in my house? But we were lucky to find that. And there are many houses in Chappaqua. You'll be as lucky because the early houses are very, very well documented. But let's say you bought a 40s house, a 50s house, even, early 1900s. Who were these people who lived in my house? Now, normally, like in New Rochelle, I would tell you to go to the directories. These were, even if you didn't have a phone, these directories had everybody listed, what they did for their occupation. It usually was the male, and then they would have the female listed, and sometimes their children. And then as you go through the year after year, you'd see widow, and then you'd realize he died, and maybe you can track down his obituary. Unfortunately, these directories do not exist for Chappaqua or Newcastle. I searched. The earliest you have are phone books, and they don't list the occupation, and they start, I believe, in the 60s. So that's not going to help you. But if you go to another community and you're interested, or you just want to find out some information about your own family, you can actually get these directories online from someplace like Heritage Quest. This is by subscription, so you have to find a library, somebody with a library card from that library. So, for example, if you know somebody who has a New Rochelle Public Library card, they can look for you and you can access the city directories. And this is the kind of information you find. For example, here's Gustav Kissel. His wife is Margaret. He's with the fire department, and they live at 137 Lincoln Avenue. You have William Clark wife is Rose, Glazier, Diamond and Sweet Inc., and their home is Rathburn Avenue. For many years, these directories would also indicate a person of color, which is sad to say. That stopped in the 20s. Now I'm going to show you some genealogy resources. Yes, this is a rabbit hole. And I often have to tell people, municipal historians are not genealogists, and we're not allowed to do genealogists because they're rabbit holes. There's some excellent genealogists in Westchester. We have a really good Westchester Genealogical Society. They can provide you with help if you really want to do a deep dive about the people you lived in your house. If you want to just go some way down, you can visit one of the many genealogy sites. Most are connected to the Mormons, and this is what you would find in them: the birth, marriage, death records, census, land records sometimes, probate records sometimes, passenger lists, naturalization lists. Some of these you can find at the county record center as well, military records, and historic newspapers. There are other ways around it, because census records are available up to 1940. So I found census online. I went for a 1910 census to see what I could find about the Conklins. And here up come all the Conklins on one sheet, telling what they did, showing that Mr. Conklin was a carpenter. One of the sons was a foreman. It gives the different occupations. The census will also tell if a person is white or Negro, is what the term that they use later on, whether they could read or write, whether they were part of the family, or if they had come from another place. All the Conklins were born in New York, according to the census. So you get a lot of information from them. And of course, the census happen every decade. Now, you can also go to Family Search. This is one of the Mormon sites, but it's free. It's more limited than their other ones, such as Ancestry.com. But I tried for Vera Winter. I wanted to see what I could find about Vera Winter, who eventually owned the house for so many years. And there she's in the 1940 census. You hit that, you come up with the 1940 census. In the 1930 census, there were land assessments and many other documents I could get just like that with Family Search. I did have to sign on, get a username and password, but now I have access to a number of vital records. You could also buy a test. You can get a free membership to Ancestry for a short period of time. You have to remember to unsubscribe. And they have a 40% off right now, I noticed. And then you can find all kinds of things. This is probably one of the most used, one of the more popular Ancestry sites. We used to have them in the libraries. I don't think the libraries are doing it anymore because you could only use them in the library itself. But you can always look and try. There were a few Westchester libraries that held on for a while. Now, newspapers, weeklies, daily, they're digitized, they're searchable, they're online, free or by subscription. The New York Public Library has access to a lot of newspapers. It opened up worlds for me because the New York Age, which was the African American newspaper, has all been digitized and it's online at the New York Public. It's been a wonderful resource for me as city historian for New Rochelle. Have all kinds of databases. Will take some time. You'll get used to it, but it's a good resource. New York Historic Newspapers is a free site, and they have a number of Westchester community newspapers, including the Chappaqua Journal from 1908 to current, the Chappaqua Sun from 1954 to 56, also the Newcastle News from 1945 to I don't know when, and the Newcastle Tribune from 1927 on. The other one, the Eastern State Journal, is often good. You can just do a general search for Westchester, and sometimes other communities picked up stories that happen in your town. So this is a really good resource, and it's absolutely free. And they keep adding more digitized. It's expensive to digitize newspapers, so it's going to be gradual. We also have a number of newspapers microfilm at the library. Thenewspapers.com, you can get a free subscription for a while, but remember to unsubscribe before they start charging you if you don't want to pay for it. They have a number of newspapers, digitized newspapers as well. And this great site, Old Fulton, New York, is a little tricky to use, but once you get used to it, they have all kinds of things that are digitized. It's one guy that created this site, and it's a lot of fun, and you can do a deep dive on this site. You can also spend a lot of time. There are some websites that give you tutorials on how best to use Old Fulton, New York. And what I found when I did just a quick search, I found in some newspaper when I put in Winter, because I became very interested in Ezra Winter. Here's when George Howe sold property to Aaron Winter, decorative artist, the Conklin estate, comprising a house, I think, an old barn, and something of land. Sorry, it's not clear. So there was a little article about when he bought it back in 1918. And I also found in the Newcastle Tribune an obituary for him. Ezra Winter, artist, dies. And this was from 1945. Didn't give a whole lot of information. It did tell me that he was not married to Vera White and didn't live in Chappaqua at the time. So yeah, my interest was really piqued about this Ezra Winter. So now I just do a general Google search, and yeah, I found out he was this well-known muralist, 1886 to 1949. He did these murals at the George Rogers Clark Memorial, which is in Indiana. It was a memorial to a Revolutionary War figure. And he did these gorgeous murals. He also did murals for Radio City Music Hall. There's some in the Library of Congress. That's a national park site in Indiana, and they have on their website that his first wife was Vera Baudet, and that turned out to be Vera White. She was a model in one of his drawing classes. They had 3 daughters, so I'm getting some more information. Here's a story about how they were believed dead when they were on a ship that was sunk by a German submarine, and then they weren't dead. His second wife was Patricia Murphy Alberts, who I later found out was patented one of the deodorants, or a family member did. It's some wild thing. And that he designed and supervised the painting camouflage on board U.S. shipping for World War I. When I read his obituary in 1945, it was about his suicide. He was only 63. Apparently, when he was doing a mural, he stepped back and lost his footing and never really recovered from his injuries and became greatly depressed and despondent and ended his life. But here his wife Vera kept that Chappaqua property for all those years. And I found this great design observer, this woman, Jessica Helfin, had gone through the papers they have of his in Indiana and done a whole story about Ezra Winter. It's really very interesting, but yeah, the true rabbit hole for me. And I won't take you all down it because we are now coming close to the end. I also wanted to point out that the New York Times, if you have a subscription or a digital subscription, either delivery, you have access to the archives and the time machine, which starts in very early times. It's very easy to do searches. I found numerous articles about Ezra Winter on the New York Times. I use this site constantly, because the Times covered everything from the late 1800s through. So it's 1851 to today. So here's another very good resource for you. In Chappaqua, there were a number of Sears homes. These were homes that were built from patterns. You could figure out what house you wanted in the Sears catalog. buy the pattern and have it built. They had names to them, and you have a number in Chappaqua. The Newcastle Historical Society did an exhibit about them years ago. There are two websites that have databases, and there are people that spend lots of time tracking down these Sears houses. So if you think that you have a Sears house or could have one, you might want to check out some of those sites. They really were quite attractive. As you can see, the one on the right is one in Mount Vernon. I'm not sure the other two are in Westchester as well. And two houses that are very, very, very specific to doing house histories, discovering the history of your house by Betsy Green. And Uncommon Cape was done about a Westchester house. Those are very specific and available through the Westchester library system. So that brings us to a close of our house history. Here's our contact, the Westchester County Historical Society. I'm the co-director. Here's my website, barbara@westchesterhistory.com. And here is the site for the county archives. I really want to encourage you to make an appointment with Gray Williams and Marion Williams and use the Historical Society as well as your public library, because they will be both areas will be tremendously helpful as well. And now I'm happy to answer any questions.
I would actually like to take the first question, Barbara, because a patron who couldn't come, he wrote it to me and asked if he would answer it. He lives in Pleasantville, and he has a freestanding garage, a garage for his cars. But he was wondering if these structures were originally used as barns for horses.
Some were. That's a good question. And some were for barns, but most likely it was, if it's, small and it doesn't look barn-like, it was built as a detached garage. And most homes with detached garages were built pre-1917. They built detached garages because they didn't know what the newfangled automobile would do. It might explode and take down a house. So all the early houses, once automobiles were invented, had the detached garages.
Okay, thank you. I will answer him. We have one question in the chat so far. Just many thanks. By the way, I just want you to, it was right, you were discussing an area which was right by where I lived in Chappaqua. I lived on Dodge Farm. So it was interesting. Yeah, so I loved every second of it. And your hints were wonderful. And I do want to encourage everybody, you can get a New York Public Library card. As long as you live in New York State, you could get one for Manhattan, which is where all this these archives online archives, yeah. So it's free and just for New York State residences.
And Joan, do you want them just to email me for the list of resources? I'm happy to handle that if you want.
Okay, that's fine. That would be wonderful. So Barbara Davis, barbara@westchesterhistory.com would be the. Just look at that. I'm sure
we're
everybody's
open Monday through Thursday, and our reading room is open on Wednesdays by appointment.
Wonderful.
Gray, are you still
I've been taking notes, not taking pictures. Gray, I don't know. I will tell you in a minute.
I wondered if he wanted to add anything.
Yes, he's still on. Maybe not. People are leaving, so it was.
Okay. All right.
I want to thank you, Barbara. This was wonderful. I hope everybody took pictures. I am old-fashioned. I had my pencil. I was taking notes.
Well, thank you for having me again, Joan.
Okay, thank you all for coming in. I hope you'll go to our website, chappaqua library.org, to see all the offerings we have at the Chappaqua Library.